Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and comment below, because what you about to hear inside Angola Prison will chill you to your core. The steel doors slammed shut with a deafening clang, echoing through the cavernous halls of Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola. The walls, coated in decades of grime and blood, absorbed every whisper, every threat, every desperate plea. It was a place where the air itself seemed to hum with danger, a living entity feeding on fear and broken spirits. James Slim Carter, a young inmate with sharp eyes and a nervous energy, had just stepped into the deadliest maximum security block. His first day, yet he already felt the oppressive weight of the place pressing down on him. The whispers of seasoned convicts warned him, "Survive the first night. Maybe you live. Fail, and no one will remember your name." The tension in the yard was palpable. Men with hardened faces and tattooed histories moved like predators, scanning, judging, calculating. One wrong look, one careless word, and the consequences were swift and brutal. Slim clutched his bunk tightly, listening to the distant screams of men echoing from cells he hadn't even seen. A sudden commotion erupted at the far end of the block. Screams pierced the stale air, metal hitting metal. A fight? Or worse, the guards shouted. But in Angola, guards were often too few and too cautious to stop the chaos before blood was spilled. Slim's stomach churned as he realized he had no allies here. Everyone was a potential enemy, every shadow a hiding place for violence. It wasn't just the fights that scared newcomers. It was the unspoken code, the invisible rules carved into the stone and reinforced through pain. Betrayal was a currency. Trust was a weapon. And the most dangerous players were those who had mastered the art of silence, lurking in corners, watching, waiting. Slim caught a glimpse of a figure across the yard, a man known as Blackbird, infamous for manipulating inmates and guards alike. His cold eyes met Slim's for a brief second, and in that instant, Slim felt a chill that went deeper than the Louisiana night. Blackbird smiled faintly, a twitch of lips that promised danger, and then disappeared into the shadows of the block. Slim's heart raced. That night, as the lights dimmed and the clang of the final lock echoed through the block, he realized something terrifying. Surviving Angola wasn't just about strength or cunning. It was about anticipating betrayal, navigating a web of alliances, and confronting the darkness lurking inside every man, including himself. And then, a scream sliced through the block, closer this time, agonizing and desperate. Slim froze. This wasn't just another fight. Something more sinister was unfolding. Something that would change everything he thought he knew about Angola. What had happened? Who was in danger? And could Slim survive long enough to find out? The next morning, Slim woke to the harsh glare of fluorescent lights bouncing off cold concrete walls. His body ached from the tension and fear that had gripped him all night. The screams he had heard weren't just echoes, they were warnings. In Angola, every sound could signal a death sentence. He moved cautiously to the yard, keeping to the shadows. Conversations here were coded, every laugh or curse a potential trap. Slim's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Blackbird, trying to understand why the man's gaze had frozen him the night before. There was power in fear, and Blackbird wielded it like a weapon. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the far end of the yard. Slim watched as two inmates squared off, one wielding a makeshift shank, the other readying his fists. The fight was brutal and merciless, each strike echoing against the stone walls. Blood spattered across the cracked concrete, and the stench of sweat and iron filled the air. Slim instinctively stepped back, his stomach twisting. This was survival, unfiltered, and he had to learn quickly. As the guards reluctantly intervened, Slim noticed a subtle exchange, a nod, a glance, a slip of a message passed between two men. Alliances were forming, and secrets were traded like currency. Blackbird appeared from the shadows, watching, calculating. His eyes swept the yard and then locked onto Slim again. Slim's chest tightened. He realized he was being sized up, measured, marked. Later, in the cramped confines of his cell, Slim heard the whispered tales from older inmates. Angola wasn't just a prison. It was a kingdom of crime within walls. Smuggling, extortion, underground fights. Every corner had its lord, every block its enforcer. And at the top, Blackbird ruled with subtle terror, manipulating men to do his bidding without lifting a finger. Slim's curiosity collided with fear. He wanted to survive, but he also wanted to understand. Why did Blackbird smile at him? Why did he feel that pull towards someone he knew he couldn't trust? Slim was learning the hardest lesson of all. In Angola, danger wasn't always visible, and the greatest threats were often those who whispered rather than shouted. That night, a new inmate arrived, a man whose reputation preceded him. They called him Chains. He moved with calm precision, his eyes like steel traps, and every step seemed to command the room. Slim felt the atmosphere shift. Chains was not just another inmate. He carried a darkness that rivaled Blackbird's, and his arrival set the block on edge. Rumors spread quickly. Chains had a past littered with prison riots, murders, and betrayals that had made headlines outside Angola. Now, he was here, and the tension crackled in the air like a live wire. Slim felt a cold knot in his stomach. Two forces, unseen yet powerful, were about to collide, and he was standing right in the middle of the battlefield. As Slim lay on his bunk, listening to the distant echoes of inmates moving through the block, he realized the chilling truth. Survival in Angola wasn't about who was stronger, faster, or tougher. It was about reading the shadows, predicting the moves of men like Blackbird and Chains, and deciding who to trust before it was too late. And then, a muffled scream erupted from the opposite block, a sound that cut through the night and sent a shiver down Slim's spine. This was no ordinary fight. This was the beginning of something far more sinister. Slim had begun to understand the rhythm of Angola, the pulse of danger that ran through every corridor, every cell. But nothing prepared him for the challenge that was coming. The block had grown restless. Whispers of Chains' arrival circulated like wildfire, fueling tension, fear, and anticipation. That afternoon, Slim was called to the mess hall. It wasn't for food. It was for a meeting he didn't want to attend. Blackbird was already there, seated like a king on a steel bench, his eyes scanning the room with quiet menace. Chains stood opposite him, his presence commanding, unyielding. Inmates watched from the shadows, sensing the collision of two deadly forces. Blackbird spoke first, his voice low and deliberate. "Chains, this isn't your yard. Don't mistake the rules for weakness." Chains' reply was a slow smile, chilling in its calm. "I don't need permission to survive. I only need the walls to hold them in." Slim felt a chill. This wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. Around him, men shifted uneasily, knowing the tension could erupt into violence at any moment. And in that room, Slim realized that the invisible rules of Angola were about to be rewritten, and he would be forced to choose sides, or be crushed in the crossfire. Days passed, each one more harrowing than the last. Slim observed quietly, noting alliances forming, betrayals whispered behind closed doors, and power subtly exchanged. Every glance, every cough, every misplaced step carried potential consequences. He began to see the patterns, the unspoken signals that determined who lived and who didn't. One night, Slim overheard a plan. Chains was plotting something violent, something that could destabilize the entire block. And Blackbird knew it. He smiled at Slim across the yard that night, a smile that said more than words ever could. Watch. Learn. Survive. Slim's first real test came sooner than he expected. He was cornered in the laundry room by two inmates loyal to Chains. The air was thick with sweat and malice. They demanded information, pressing him, testing his loyalties. Slim's heart raced, but he remembered Blackbird's unspoken lesson. Fear is a tool, not a weakness. With calculated calm, Slim deflected their questions, weaving a story that bought him time. He didn't know who he could trust. Not fully, but he knew one thing. Mistakes here weren't forgiven. The smallest misstep could mean a lifetime behind these walls, or a life cut short. As he returned to his bunk that night, Slim noticed a folded piece of paper slid under the door. Trembling, he opened it. A single message was written in precise, almost clinical handwriting. "You are being watched. Choose carefully. Angola has a memory, and it never forgets." Slim stared at the words, a cold sweat forming. He realized that he was no longer just surviving. He was part of something much bigger, something darker, and he might be in far deeper than he ever intended. And then, from the opposite side of the block, the unmistakable sound of metal scraping concrete echoed, a signal. Something was about to happen, something that could change everything Slim thought he knew about Angola. The block was electric that night. Shadows stretched like claws across the walls as Slim moved carefully toward the yard. Every sound, the clanging of metal gates, the scrape of boots on concrete, the distant murmurs, felt amplified, warning him that something was coming. It began with a scream. Not the usual brawling fight, but a guttural, desperate scream that tore through the night air. Slim froze, heart pounding. Across the yard, Chains had made his move. Men scattered, some running for safety, others standing frozen, caught between fear and loyalty. Blackbird emerged from the shadows, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the chaos. Chains didn't hesitate. He struck fast and hard, targeting Blackbird's inner circle. The violence was precise, brutal, each attack calculated to send a message. Slim ducked behind a stack of crates, barely breathing as fists, shanks, and screams collided around him. The yard had become a battlefield, and every second felt like an eternity. Slim realized then that survival wasn't about brute strength. It was about reading the storm before it hit. He noticed patterns. Chain's men moved in coordinated strikes, but gaps existed. He memorized every exit, every shadow, every weak spot. Every choice now carried life or death stakes. Amid the chaos, Slim saw Blackbird cornered by Chains himself. For a split second, time froze. Blackbird's calm defiance clashed with Chain's fury, creating a tension that seemed almost supernatural in its intensity. But this was real. Every eye was on them, every breath held, every man waiting to see which predator would dominate. Slim made a choice. He didn't step forward to fight. He couldn't. But he moved strategically, distracting one of Chain's lieutenants, buying Blackbird just enough time to pivot, evade, and counterstrike. Blood, sweat, and fear mingled in the night air, painting the yard in chaos. Then it happened, a sudden, deafening crash. A fire extinguisher had been knocked over, sending a cloud of powder into the yard. Visibility vanished. Screams escalated into shouts. Men collided blindly, the stench of sweat and fear thick in the air. Slim used the confusion to slip toward the shadows, realizing that surviving this night meant being smarter than everyone else, not stronger. By the time the guards intervened, the yard was a scene of carnage. Broken benches, scattered tools, and the cries of the wounded filled the air. Chains had disappeared into the shadows, leaving chaos in his wake. Blackbird stood tall amidst the destruction, his cold gaze sweeping the yard as if he had orchestrated the storm all along. Slim returned to his cell, chest heaving, blood pounding in his ears. He understood something terrifying. Angola didn't forgive weakness. The battle between Chains and Blackbird had only just begun, and Slim had been pulled directly into the center of it. He lay on his bunk, adrenaline still coursing, when he heard it, a single knock at the cell door. A voice, calm and familiar, whispered, "You're ready for the next move. But are you ready for what comes after, when loyalty dies?" Slim's blood ran cold. He had survived the chaos, but the real danger, the part that would test him beyond anything he had ever known, was still coming. Slim barely slept. The knock on his cell door replayed in his mind like a warning he couldn't escape. Angola was in a fragile quiet, the kind that comes only after chaos, when everyone waits to see who will strike next. Slim sensed it deep in his chest. The war between Blackbird and Chains wasn't over. It was entering its most dangerous stage. By morning, rumors flooded the block. Chains had vanished into one of the abandoned wings, a part of Angola known for malfunctioning cameras and blind spots. That alone was enough to scare even veteran inmates. Nobody hid there unless they were preparing something bigger than a fight. Slim headed to the yard, keeping close to the walls. He spotted Blackbird waiting for him, leaning against a pillar with a cold, calculated calm. "You moved smart last night," Blackbird said. "Smart enough that Chains noticed you. Smart enough that I noticed too." Slim didn't respond. He didn't trust Blackbird, not fully. But he couldn't deny something important. Survival inside Angola was rarely a solo mission. Blackbird leaned closer. "Chains is planning to take the entire block. Tonight. And he wants you on his side." Slim's heart pounded. "Why me?" "Because you think before you act," Blackbird replied. "And because he believes you can be turned." It was a trap, Slim knew it. But he also knew that refusing Chains directly could put a target on his back. Angola wasn't a place where you said no to the wrong man. That night, Slim was escorted by two silent inmates to the abandoned wing. The hallways were dark, cold, stripped of life. and at the far end stood Chains, arms folded, expression unreadable. Chains spoke quietly. Blackbird is done. Men like him keep Angola in darkness, and I'm about to wipe that darkness clean. I want you with me. You've got instincts. You know how to survive. Choose the right side. Slim realized the truth in that moment. Neither man wanted peace. Neither wanted justice. They wanted control over the yard, the block, the prison. Chains' revolution was just another power grab, another cycle of violence waiting to repeat. Slim lifted his chin. I'm not choosing sides. I'm choosing survival. Chains' eyes hardened. Then you've chosen against me. Before anything could happen, the lights blazed on. Sirens erupted. Guards stormed the wing, their footsteps thunderous. Someone had tipped them off. Chains stared at Slim, betrayal twisting his expression. You did this. Slim didn't respond. He didn't have to. Angola was a place where silence kept you alive. The guards seized Chains, ending the reign of fear he had attempted to build. The block buzzed with shock. Some looked relieved. Others looked terrified at what Blackbird might do next. But Blackbird never confronted Slim. He simply nodded at him later that night, a silent acknowledgement. Slim had made it through, not because he was the strongest, not because he was the most connected, but because he had learned the real law of Angola. Survival belonged to the ones who understood when to disappear, when to stand still, and when to walk away. As he lay on his bunk, Slim knew one thing for certain. Angola would never forget him. And he would never forget what Angola had taught him. If you were hooked by this journey inside one of America's deadliest prisons, then hit that like button, smash subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves true crime stories. More real prison tales are coming. Each darker, each more shocking than the last. Stay locked in.